Hello, and welcome to this short discussion of the to be or not to be speech. It's at this point in teaching Hamlet to my seniors that we just spend a day on the speech, and there's lots of ways to do this. And what I'll present here is a version of what I do, but I change this up pretty frequently. But the bottom line is, I think it's good whether it's the to be speech, whether it's a favorite scene of yours, really whatever, that occasionally we stop and look at some text really closely because I think there's a tendency when reading great literature to digest it quickly and sort of exist on like a 10,000 foot level. So I just think this is a speech that's really worth digging into. So we have a day, and here are just some things that I do. I set it up by asking students what are the five most important relationships and or hopes in your life. So often it's college education, professional life, family, things like that. We list them on the board, and before Hamlet begins the play, we make a list of what Hamlet's most important things are, and they're very similar, right? University of Wittenberg, staying connected to Ophelia, his friends Rosencrantz, Guildenstern, Horatio. And we see relatively quickly here, without any explanation, that a lot of Hamlet's most important elements in his life have either been changed or taken from him. And that is essentially the context of the speech. One of the most important things, I think, when looking at something like to be or not to be, or tomorrow and tomorrow, or like pick a famous monologue or soliloquy, is to be mindful that it isn't just a piece to audition with. It's not a museum, piece. It's not like a really famous speech, and that's why we care about it. It's a critical moment in a person's life where this person who says this, for a bunch of reasons, has to say these things. And that to me is a really important entry point into, in this case, into the to be speech. That it's a particular kid, young person, who has gone through some things, and at this very point in the center of the play has to say this, has to have these thoughts. So there's lots of ways to do this. Sometimes I define the 6 or 7 terms that are most confusing, like rub and contumely and bodkin. So there's a way to do that. If you want to do that, you can have students do that. But we read the speech, and sometimes I show a few versions up front. And the first thing I think is to just say what literally is going on, to not default to interpretation, but to default to just having a literal understanding of what's happening. And then maybe we watch another version or two, and then I break up my students into pairs or triads, and I tell them to do a few things. One, any questions they have or observations they have. That's good. And then I ask them to look at how the thoughts move, even just to take like 3 or 4 lines and ask, how does he move? Like, how do you go from a philosophical question to a falconry term? How do you go from a theological speculation to wondering about law, for example, or grunting and sweating under a weary life? What does Hamlet possibly know about a weary life? This is not someone who's working, tough hours in a retail job. But pay attention to how one thought he has reminds him of the next thought. I think that's more liberating, actually, than asking what things mean. Pay attention to the movement of thoughts. And then I just open up to a conversation. That can be a half an hour. And here's some versions of the play that are good. They're all on YouTube. Mel Gibson's takes place in a crypt, which is kind of blunt and handy. Brana's takes place in the lobby, literally, which is what the play suggests. And Tennant's version is great. It's full of cameras. My favorite is Andrew Scott's because it looks like he's never had these thoughts before. Papa Essiedu is amazing. Ben Crystal's version and original pronunciation is fascinating. And so we return. We have this conversation, and the only thing I add I really don't want my students to feel that, they're waiting for me to tell them what this speech means. They often deal with, images, how his mind moves. Is this a version of clinical depression? The only thing I ask them is, where are the personal pronouns? Because literally there are none. That literally speaking, Hamlet isn't contemplating his own suicide. He's philosophically speculating on why people endure the challenges life presents to them. And it's because of the mystery of the afterlife. And I don't tell them that's what the speech means, but it does seem to be that he's the sort of person who, when he has really particular challenges, that one of his defaults is to intellectualize and to philosophize. So that's interesting. And I tell students, you'll meet people like this, people in college and graduate school who, hear terrible family news or are going through a really serious challenge, and they just dive into their work as if that is sort of a therapy in a way. And maybe Hamlet's that. Maybe that's his way of dealing with not actually being in college. But anyway, regardless of how you do it, I just really want to promote the idea that spending a full class period on this speech, however you want to do it, is really worth your time. Good luck and happy reading.